So let's jump into the Paris Comic-Con's images of everything from the Siege reveals. And we're going to do this in bursts of parts so that way we don't overload each segment. So the first one we're going to talk about is three characters. We're going to talk about Pteraxadon, Prowl, and Six Gun. And
Mm-hmm.
these three were revealed to us. We didn't know anything about these previously. And so this is all big news. Obviously, Six Gun being based on the character that came with Metroplex. So if you were someone,
That's why he looks familiar. I was like, I'm getting a Metroplex vibe with him this whole time.
yeah, what Six Gun was originally with Metroplex was Metroplex had a whole bunch of pieces that would attach to his city mode, and it was a parts former thing. And you would put all those city pieces together, like the legs of Six Gun in the original Metroplex were these missile launchers that went on Metroplex's city mode. So something like the whole Battle Masters thing, which is not the Battle Masters, the Weaponizers, which is
Mm.
all about parts forming and coming apart and going back together to make stuff. This is totally made for something like Six Gun, even in his history all the way back in 1986. So it
Mm-hmm.
works out, and it completes your Metroplex, because the reality is that while the original generation's Metroplex, the Titan one, while it did come with Scamper, you didn't get Six Gun, and
Mm.
third-party companies were trying to fill that gap and stuff, but
Yep.
now we have an official version of it. So this is pretty cool. So that's something that a lot of people who picked up that very first Titan that we got in Metroplex, that's a good way to complete it. And again, it looks cool. The fact that it still does that old Six Gun idea of turning into pieces and stuff. I'm actually kind of curious how these pieces will attach to Metroplex himself. Obviously,
If they even do.
yeah, if they even, and not to mention, again, the scale is kind of, it's different now because this is like a deluxe scale kind of figure, where
Yeah.
the original Six Gun was probably went up to the waist of the original Metroplex, and so like just his legs alone would be able to like cover the legs of Metroplex and stuff. So obviously the scale is going to
Mm-hmm.
be different here, but it's still pretty cool that it exists. Prowl, we talked about it in the last segment when we were talking about Barricade. It's a very fusion of a Cybertronian kind of vehicle mixed with a Datsun Z from the 70s. For people that are wondering about the Cybertronian written on the side, I already translated it. It stands for police, so it's nothing.
Oh, okay.
It's nothing racy at this point. Another thing that's kind of interesting is I find that just his overall aesthetic in robot mode is very reminiscent of the alternators that turned into the Subarus,
Yep. Yep.
or alternatively the Jazz, the Meister, and Shockwave.
Mm-hmm.
So, which turned into the RX-8s. So it has that overall transformation and feel to it. It's uncanny how much it is. I wouldn't be surprised when transforming this that it's going to feel like the exact same toy.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last one is the Petrodon here. What's cool about this is so this one's supposed to be a Decepticon, and within Transformers history, there's never really been a pterodactyl or anything of that manner that was a Decepticon outside of one character, which was in Transformers Victory. There was Dino King, which was their dinosaur bad guy team,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a character called UK Ryu. Oh, and it's like, see, it's just me reading into it a little. So UK Ryu was the pterodactyl of Dino King. That was a pretender shell, and the inner robot, the toys themselves didn't have melee weapons, but they usually came with guns. But
Mm-hmm.
in the show, they had melee weapons. And so, and the interesting thing was the melee weapon that he had was kind of like an axe, sickle kind of weapon. So he turns into that. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure this is all just a happy coincidence, but it's funny how it turns into a Decepticon pterodactyl and it turns into a melee weapon that kind of could have that connection. What was interesting with the photos that were shown here, and I might not have the space to show all the photos, but in the '86 movie, the way Prowl died was he was kind of like shot in the like left side shoulder, which then did a domino effect and obviously caused his innards to explode, and then he like had the smoke come out of his mouth. And so they're showing this blast accessory hit his shoulder here in the image.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it's also a blast accessory that you're supposed to put on the end of the axe. But these look pretty cool. Again, the most interesting to me obviously being the 6-gun. That one really
Oh, just a little correction on the on that quote unquote axe. Apparently, according to this info here, it's not an axe, it's a scythe.
Oh, is it? But it looks like an axe.
It is an axe, but if you read it, binary edgewing scythe weapon mode in 5 easy steps. But it's like, this is not a scythe.
Exactly. A scythe is one blade that's, very right angled. I mean, if you cut off, even if you cut off one of the wings of this pterodactyl here, it still wouldn't be a scythe. It would be more of like a hook blade or something. There's a ninja weapon. I forget what it's called. That's kind of
with the chain?
Yeah. Like, oh my God. Anyways, but the point is like, so 6-gun kind of serves a purpose here. Makes sense. Like, it really fills the gap that's been needed. The Prowl is more if you're looking for a Cybertronian Prowl, but I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with what we got from Classics already in the past. That turned into like the old 350Z from like a couple of years ago, about a decade ago now, the 350Z. So that was pretty good mold to begin with. Obviously, like this one, it's very alternators. Like, and that's a good and bad thing. In that alternators, I found one of their biggest weaknesses was none of them really had feet. They really just had the bumpers of the cars that just
has like toes and stuff like that.
And so we're getting a lot of that here. And I mean, it has those alternator shoulders. It has that alternator proportion. Like, this is something that if you showed me a silhouette of this, like the robot mode, I'd be like, oh, is that like alternator smokescreen or something? Like it's very alternators. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but it's not really something new. At least the alt mode is kind of interesting to me because, again, they go for a very Cybertronian meets Datsun Z from the 70s kind of look. So I appreciate that, at least, where they're trying to keep true to that. But otherwise, it's more the weaker of the three here. And again, the Battlemaster Ptetraxadon here, at least it's a little weapon. And I dig those energy accessories. Those are going to be kind of cool to have in the long run if you gather a bunch of them for dioramas and play sets. And I guess it's me looking into it going, well, and I think maybe it's a throwback to that old Decepticon character from Victory, so it's at least cool to have that. But otherwise, there's not much else that could be said about these two. Anything you want to talk about before we move on?
Let's see here. I'm kind of liking the alt mode for 6-gun, just an interesting and weird, Cybertronian looking thing.
Yeah, it's a good fusion. Yeah,
it's weird. I think it's a little bit weird that it still has a cockpit, even though I don't think there's any small people on Cybertron that can use a cockpit like that.
Well, all the alt modes have cockpits, even though there's no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, why would you need a cockpit? But that's just me being a nerd.
That's always been a thing. Yeah.
But no, I'm digging them. It's pretty cool. I would say they just need to change that that info and not say it's a scythe, say it's an axe, because it just still looks like an axe. It doesn't make sense.
Well, and another thing too is just like the original 6-gun.
I hope that's a typo anyway.
Yeah, it's probably something that, because those extended blurbs there, they're not something that's on the bios. It's more just explaining what the toy is for marketers. Just to iterate also, like in the case of 6-gun, the original 6-gun never had like an alt mode. He just was a sum of parts that attached to Metroplex and then would combine to make a robot mode. So it's the first time he's ever really had some kind of a confirmed alt mode. And it's also the first time he's ever really had hands, because...
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing I dig about it, is that they put the long guns and the hands in the same part.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool when you look at it compared to the original toy.
Yeah, the original just had guns for arms. So
yeah.
And at least, again, if you have this mold, then now you ask yourself, well, what are they going to repaint that into? Well, you had Metro Titan back in the day, and we never got a Metro Titan repaint of Metroplex, which I still to this day find bizarre, but I guess because
Maybe they're saving it.
I think it's
Back pocket?
It's a combination of it's an obscure repaint from Transformers Zone, so no one except the Japanese would really know it. And then you say to yourself, well, why didn't Japan then get it released? Well, that's just it. It's Japan and it's a big mold. In the same way that we had Grand Maximus, it was a pre-order exclusive from Japan, and they said, oh, if it meets these pre-orders, we're going to give this Pretender shell free. And it didn't meet the pre-orders. So It was like, oh, I guess Japan and big toys, not a good mix. So, and Grand Maximus is less obscure than Metro Titan on top of that, and his pre-orders didn't do well. So it's a combination of those things. But I still think we might even get in this case, it was called Metro Shot, which was the name of the 6-gun repaint. I think we still might get a Metro Shot repaint out of this because it's a small toy, so I could see them just doing that. As for the others, I could see this pterodactyl being done in swoop colors down the line. And as for Prowl, well, we know his future.
Yeah, exactly.
We know exactly what he's going to be retooled in down the line, and some stuff probably that we're not expecting. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this is heavily retooled into a Jazz or a Wheeljack or who knows what. But the point is right now we definitely know 3 molds that'll definitely get a repaint out of it, and maybe even some oddball other stuff. But either way, we got these 3 pretty cool. We'll move on to the next stuff.